Hello everyone, and welcome to our next video. So in the previous video I gave you a very brief introduction to a setup that I really like to work with, right? So if we look at the code, we have managed to create a fully working application that we can now start developing. We also managed to integrate testing to the environment, which will allow us to have a test-centric approach. We have also integrated Prettier and ESLint, and this means that we can automate checking for coding best practices, at least to some extent with the rules from ESLint, and we can also automate coding formatting. So this is going to be quite important for us when we start creating pull requests to the master branch in our GitHub repository, because then we can also integrate these tests and these checks to ensure that we can only merge branches into master that pass these checks. I created a repository in GitHub so that the code is always up to date, and if you want to download the code or clone the repository, feel free to do so. It contains the code from the previous video, and I'll keep this regularly updated. We will also work with actions to continuous integration and continuous deployment. We will work with the pull requests. We will work with issues. Projects we will do via JIRA, right? But it may also be the case that we work with any of these other tabs. We will see in the future. The main goal for today, or the main goal for this video, is to start developing our JIRA board so that we can keep track of the work that has to be done, the work that is in progress, and the work that was already completed. So I created a basic project. I didn't do anything special, just gave a name and selected a basic standard Kanban board. But I will do a few modifications here. The first one I want to do is I want to add a new column. So I click to add a new column. I come to the Kanban, to the Kanban board. Then these three dots at the top right, and then board settings. And under columns, I can add a new column here, right? So add column, and this is for in review. So I like to have a column to identify features that were already done. Because I'm the only developer currently working in this project, maybe the case that other people will also want to join me for to gather experience or to get a more hands-on approach to software development, then this may be more relevant. At the moment, this is going to be somewhat automatic. The moment that it's for review, it will also go to done because I'm the only coder. So the second thing I want to do is to move backlog to the Kanban backlog, which now means that the backlog itself is not going to appear in my columns, right? So I have only selected for development, in progress, in review, and done. And this gives me a cleaner interface to work with, because the backlog, as you may imagine, is going to grow to become quite big. So before we start developing any feature, one thing I like to do is to always think slightly ahead on the several main features that we want to develop within that portion of our application. I could immediately jump into development and start writing code that I know is going to be useful, but it's very easy to grow the scope of a task beyond what it's originally needed. And this is because, well, this is a well-known problem of scope creep, but this is because we start to focus on the immediate problems that start to arise. And if we don't have a clear picture of what we want to achieve, then we may extend this development much longer than it was initially required. And because we have a lot to do here and we have a lot of functionality to implement, I want to keep it simple at the beginning, right? Because we are taking a microservices first approach, which is, to be honest, more for the sake of learning than for the sake of every single application should be done like this from now on. That's not the case. But because I want to address the many challenges of microservices, I am starting the whole application with microservices in mind. So because we have several parts or several services to implement, it's a lot of work and we need to keep things organized, right? And for that, I'm going to use the board here from JIRA. So let's start with user stories, right? So we were talking about authentication in the previous video. So I think it's a good place for us to start development. So let's think from a user perspective. The things that I want the user to do, or actually the user wants to do when they arrive in my application, is quite simple. Well, as a user, I want to sign up when I arrive to the application for the first time so that I can access the app. Right, so this is an example of a user story. So a user story normally has this shape as a something. I want to something so that I can something. Right, so as an actor, and this then can vary. In our case here, it will be mostly a user, but it can be a manager, it can be an employee. So I mean, like if your application has these different roles, right? Imagine that the application has the role of a manager and the application has the role of a team member and the role of an owner, right? So as an owner, I want to be able to alter settings of every single member of my project so that I can ensure that permissions are set correctly, for example, right? This would be a story from the perspective of the owner. In our case, we will focus mostly on users, right? So let's keep it simple. As a user, I want to sign up to the app so that I can access the platform, right? Quite straightforward, no big problems here. That's the first story that I can think of. The second story is naturally, as a user, I want to sign in so that I can use the application, right? If I'm not able to use the application, or if I'm not able to sign in, I cannot use the application again, or so that I can access the application multiple times, right? Multiple times, or we'll keep it like this for the moment. It's pretty clear what we want to implement. This is another way of creating the story, right? We don't need to create here at the top. We can create in create issue, but for the sake of readability, I prefer to create it here. So as a user, I want to verify my email address or my sign up information so that I can confirm I am a real user, right? So normally this would mean a verification email coming via from our platform with a link that then is verified by our backend. This verification is important because I plan to place this application in its actual domain so that the external world can access, and this can be somehow developed collaboratively. Okay, the next one, and I think we are coming to an end here. So we thought about sign in, we thought about sign up, we thought about email verification, and the last one that comes to my mind is sign out, right? So as a user, I want to sign out so that, I already typed this in the past, so that I can leave the application safely, right? And I'll create this story. Great. Now if I come to my Kanban board, you see that there is nothing here. And this is because all my stories are still in the backlog, right? So normally in a planning cycle, in a 2-week sprint, you would create the stories, break the stories down into tasks, estimate these tasks, then check how many developer hours you have, and then prioritize the stories according to their importance. And based on how many developer hours you have, you would take the stories from the backlog and bring them into selected for development, right? And you would do that every 2 weeks for every sprint. So in my case, it's pretty clear that signing up and verifying the sign up information are the first 2 steps. So let me bring these 2 up. We will start working on this once we go back to coding. Now, if I look at my Kanban board, then you can see that there are 2 stories here. Now, one thing that I like to do is to try to break this down into subtasks, right? So if I click on UA1 here, this is going to take me to the detailed view, and I can create subtasks by clicking on this link. And the first subtask that I see in this application is that I want to validate and sanitize input from the user, right? I want to make sure that the input is valid according to my business rules, and I want to sanitize the input to ensure that the user cannot provide malicious code or cannot enter malicious code into my application. Once I validate and sanitize the input from the user, then what I need to do is I need to save the user information to the database, right? So I validate and sanitize the input. I save the information, the user information to the database. Maybe here it would make even more sense to encrypt or hash the password, right? Encrypt password, provided password, right? That's another subtask. Then we have save user information to the database. And then last but not least, send verification email to the provided user email, right? This is a very basic email and password authentication flow. What I have in mind and what we will implement in the future, we will extend this to be an OAuth 2 authentication service. So the user would be able to sign up with an external application, for example, your Google account or your GitHub account. You would also be able to sign up with this. But for the sake of the first steps, until we get into the more complex aspects of the code, we will start with a simple email password sign up. And these are the tasks that I think are the most crucial ones. Of course, send appropriate response to the user once the request, or send the appropriate response to the user. It's enough. We need to think a little bit about error handling here, right? This is an aspect, so it's a topic that we will cover in more details once we start development of these tasks. But for the moment, we can postpone this discussion to some later video. We will go back to this topic in the future. Okay, anything else that I can think here? I think this would be enough for the moment. Let me have a look at my Kanban board. And let me give a refresh. Okay, then here I think is in my backlog. So my subtasks, as you can see, when I create them, they actually come to the backlog. They don't come directly to the selected for development part, even though they are subtasks of UA1, right? So I need to select them and now I can bring them here. And as you can see, if I expand, now all the subtasks are here. And if I come back to my Kanban board, then all the subtasks are under the actual parent task. Right? This is a subtask, so I cannot create a subtask. So this is as detailed as we will get. Okay, for the verification, just before I end this video, let's think about a couple of subtasks that we can implement. Oh, sorry. So, in order to verify my sign-up information, right, I need to implement the verification endpoint. Yeah, that's kind of the whole goal of the story. So let's try to break this down, right? I need to decode the verification key from the provided URL. That's the first step. Then I need to look for the user with the corresponding key. That's the second step. And then I need to verify or mark the user as verified in the system. Of course, this is based on the assumption that the user is going to receive this verification key on the email that they registered, right? So if they are the actual user, they will click on that link. If the user is registering for someone else and that person confirms, then it's really out of our hands to handle this. So we wouldn't have additional information because it's a somewhat circular process, right? I could try to include the email of the user in the verification token, but the user can only click on the verification token if the user is on his or her email. So it's a little bit of a circular process. It doesn't make sense for us to add additional complexity here. Mark the user as verified in the system is the end, and send appropriate response to the user. Right? This we are talking about backend. So let me come back here to my backlog, and I will also bring these tasks to the selected for development. Now, if I expand these two, then I can see their subtasks, and also in my Kanban board, I can see everything now. Okay, so I'm thinking that this is backend, right? This is backend. So I will actually start adding a little bit of information here. Label, right? Authentication, for sure, that's the first label. And backend, that's the second label. Yeah, I think I'll create these two little labels here. Maybe it could be the case that later on we can add some additional information, but I think that for us there is no epic related at the moment, no fixed versions, no story points. For us it will be enough to use the labels to identify the information, right? Once I place the labels, and if I want to filter, for example, by labels, then I can do so here at the beginning. Another thing that we can do, maybe we can create also an epic if you want to go down this road. This could be authentication v1, right? Authentication v1, and this summary here would be authentication service and front end. Right, so this is an epic because it's too big to be implemented as a story, but it also allows us to link the issues under the epic. So now if I open my user story, I can again come here, and now I can link my epic, right? So authentication v1, and then it's linked here. I can also see what belongs to authentication v1, and the same case here. This I can also link to my epic authentication v1. So And here I think I can also add a label of backend. So now it doesn't really make sense to have the label of authentication because the label of authentication is already summarized in the epic that we created. So if I come to the epic now, then I should see the two user stories here, right? Great. That's it for this video. For this video, I just wanted to provide a more detailed overview of what we are going to implement in the near future. In the next video, we will create a couple of tasks for the front end because this is the back end, and I also want to develop the front end. I don't want to focus too much only on the back end, and then I have an entire back end, but you still cannot interact with it. So let's, in the next video, discuss the tasks that are related with the front end so that we can develop both of them in parallel. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.